He interacts with mankind as a judge. He interacts as an executive. And he interacts as a lawgiver, a legislator. And so, boom, you have a constitution that creates three branches of government, because God interfaces with us with three faces of his nature. Our law, our constitutional drafters, we're utilizing the nature of God for trying to draft our document. And I'll tell you that one of the reasons why it's been here for so long is because it was dipped into the Word of God in its creation. And so I believe that that is why we continue to have this great document today, because it is drafted to try to have government interface with us the way that God interfaces with us. And this passage, and there's some old paintings that are out there. If you go to Washington, D.C., there's a couple of paintings that are in some of the locations that talk about this Bible study where everybody's all laid out and they're praying and there's a Bible. And this was the verse, allegedly, that was open in that painting, if you've seen that old classic. So, second issue, the Bill of Rights that we started to talk about. And New Hampshire and other places were a little bit concerned. What is going to protect us from this government coming in? And so another lie that is oftentimes that is told is that there's this clause in the Constitution about separation of church and state. And if you went through the public school system, you were taught that that's in the Constitution, just like the book of Hezekiah is in the Bible. I see a few of you scratching your head for just a minute. There is no book of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a king, but there was no book of him. And my daddy used to do the funny of, well, we know from the first book of Hezekiah, X, that he could just make up whatever he wanted to. You better know your Bible, or you might be in trouble. Well, this clause of separation of church and state is nowhere in the Constitution, just like the word democracy is nowhere in the Constitution. In fact, what the Constitution says is that Congress will make no laws regarding the establishment of religion. And why does it say that? Go back to the context of the time. You had a number of the states that actually had state religions, and you had to pay a tax to support the state religion, even if that wasn't your religion. I think Virginia was one of the states, or a couple of the other states, that had a state religion. It may have been a Christian religion, but if you lived in that state, you had to pay a tax and you had to support that particular religion. And the whole concept was one of, we needed to have a place to where you weren't compelled, you, the individual, the citizen, were not going to be compelled by your government to participate in the religion. And that Congress was not going to be allowed to make any laws regarding that. Congress was going to be limited, not people. Congress. Let me say that differently. People weren't going to be restricted from the exercise of their religion. Congress was going to be restricted from telling you what to do with regard to your religion. That's what the Bill of Rights protected. Now, there is a group of Danbury Baptists, and we've heard this phrase, separation of church and state, and I actually have a copy of the letter to the Danbury Baptists. This is one of the things I'll leave behind. Not quite the nice gift as Elizabeth is over there, but I'll leave around this little letter for you. But this letter to the Danbury Baptists, it was written by Thomas Jefferson, who of course was not a signer of the Constitution. He wasn't there. He was at the Declaration of Dependence/Independence. And the letter is written in Jeffersonian style. But he says, the affectionate sentiments of esteem and approbation, which you are so good as to express towards me on behalf of the Danbury Baptist Association, give me the highest satisfaction. Some of you know this already, but I'm a nerd. And when I went to that little small school off of South Main, one of my undergraduate studies was history. and a lot of it was ancient history, and I had to read a lot of 15th, 16th, 17th century translations out of Latin and Greek into English. And so they used to speak like this all the time. So when I hear language like this from 1776, or I actually feel very comfortable reading the King James Bible. A lot of folks say, oh, you know, King James, you can't do that, or that it really was the original King James. And I'm the guy that argues with people over, well, the King James that you think of the King James is actually 1800s version, which is the Schofield version. I like the really good King James from 1611. Where lasciviousness is in there all over the place. that daily use of word then, but not so much today. So he's writing in King Jimmy language. My duties dictate a faithful and zealous pursuit of the interests of my constituents, and in proportion as they are persuaded of my fidelity to those duties, the discharge of them becomes more and more pleasing, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only, and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence the act that the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state, adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience, I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced he has no national right in opposition to his social duties. I reciprocate your kind prayers for the protection and blessings of the common Father and Creator of man, and tender you for yourselves and your religious association assurances of my high respect and esteem. The wall between church and state was a one-way wall. It was a wall that was going to keep the state from messing with your religion. And yet we have turned it upside down on its head to say, you can't exercise your religion because we, the government, are going to dictate to you when and where you can pray and how you can express yourself. It is the complete opposite of what the letter to the Danbury Baptist was to do. It is the complete opposite of what it actually fulfills the concerns of the Danbury Baptist, is saying, what's going to happen? And Thomas Jefferson said, don't worry. This clause is a wall that protects you from the government telling you when and where and how to pray.
Ooh, preach.
Wow.
So, the letter to the Danbury Baptist, read it. Don't let somebody tell you just because some Supreme Court justice that had an axe to grind and a media that was complicit was able to go. If you know your Constitution and if you know your context, you know what is the truth. And the truth is separation of the church and state, not in the Constitution, letters of assurance to a group of Baptists that don't worry, the government ain't going to mess with you. And that's not how it's been exercised. So, let's move forward. Here we are today to where we have a debate at times over how we should use precedent and how we should interpret our Constitution. You'll hear fine-sounding words. You'll hear the words that the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Boy, that sounds nice. And boy, is it wrong. The Constitution does have within itself the means by which it can be changed. It's called amendments. And if there is something in the Constitution that needs to be changed, the document itself, in its beauty and in its wisdom, gives you the means to change it. But when they say, and when I say they, the powers of the intellectual, of the cognoscenti, of the legal world, that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, what they normally mean is not that it is a document that allows itself to be adapted by the times through the will of the people, through the processes dictated within the Constitution. What they mean is that 5 out of 4 legislators wearing black robes can change it when they want to. Or if we don't like what the 5 out of 4 did last time, we'll pack the court with a few extra people and change it to say what we want, because it's a living, breathing document. In other words, that it is dynamic and it says what we mean it to be said. Or as one president one time said, well, how do you define is? Some of you that are a little bit older than the others caught that reference, I'm sorry. But it is a document that is a living, breathing document? No. It lives and breathes on its own through its own dictates. But it is a static document when it comes to interpretation. The laws are best when they are the same for everyone, and we can engage in commerce. And we know, if you have a contract and you go before a judge, we call them law judges and fact judges, and someone comes before a judge, and this is why it's so important that we have judges like Justice Jewell, and they're interpreting a contract, and the contract says rent was due on the 1st, $100. And if someone didn't pay $100 on the 1st, the judge looks at it and says, what are the facts? Was payment made? Yes, no. No, not paid. Contract is a document. This is the law. You're done. Now, they can then exercise some compassion and some other things, saying, person who has now violated the terms of your lease, you need to go over here to go and get help. But in terms of their role as the judge, they are to look at what the law is and what the facts are and apply the law to the facts. That's a law judge. It's become popular to have a thing called fact judges. And what that means is that the judge gets the case and the contract says rent should be paid on the 1st, $100. And they say, but judge, I have a child at home, and so I shouldn't be bound by this contract. And the judge goes, oh, well, that changes everything. This contract doesn't mean anything anymore. Judgment for the single dad raising the child. But then the landowner says, but judge, that used to be my house, and then the kids moved out, and I and my wife, we moved into this small little apartment, and we're using the rent money from that to pay for her medicine. And if I don't get the rent, then she dies. Oh, well, that changes everything. Judgment now for the landowner, because his wife will die if he doesn't get the rent. But then, wait, judge, wait. It's not over with. Not only my single dad raising a child, but my child has a special disease. And if she moves, then she might get really, really sick. And so, the landlady might die, but my child might die. Oh, okay, well, judgment now for the tenant. And we go in this vicious circle of moving away from what is the law? And why even enter into a contract if the words in the law have no being? Static law. Law that is for everyone. Law that you can rely on. And sometimes the law is harsh, and that's why you go to the legislature to change it. There are many times when I served you as a judge that I would actually make my decree and say this is what the law is, and then I'd give them the phone number of their state rep. And I would say, I don't think this is a good law. You need to work on getting this changed. But my job is to take the facts and apply the law to them. And when you do that, you have peace in the land. It is a good system. Because the Lord your God, He is your what? He's your lawgiver. He is your king. He is your judge. And our Constitution has 3 branches. And you're blessed here today to have all those 3 branches represented. Your legislative branch, your judicial branch, and your executive branch. What a privilege and an honor it is to be with you today. And you got any questions?
Like 1 or 2 questions? Commissioner, great job today. How do we have static laws for the each individual state when it comes to voting to make sure that we have voter integrity?
Talk to your state reps. and one of the problems too that I love, there's always that dynamic, and I like law being the closest to the people where they are. You know, the 50 experiments with 50 states. If I don't want to live in a place where my kids are growing up and marijuana can be sold on the street corner, I could move to another state. Now, I really don't think that it's great for one state to have the ability to just cheat easily. But if I feel in my state that I need to have better laws to ensure voter integrity, and by the way, you know, you're called ugly names if you don't believe that people should be able to vote after midnight and vote by going through Jack-in-the-Box style voting. And let me tell you, my mama said nothing good ever happened after midnight. It's a very expensive way to open up your voting, is to keep it open 24 hours. That costs a lot of money and manpower and staff. And the voter integrity bill allowed people to vote up to 9 o'clock at night, from 7 to 9 for 2 weeks at least in advance, and on election day. Our founding fathers would just roll over in their graves, and then they're called ugly names because they're only providing from 7 to 9 for 2 weeks. And by the way, it's oftentimes told that it's discriminatory to not allow the voting by drive-through mail, by drive-through, Jack-in-the-Box voting, because the handicapped need it. What they don't tell you is we already have it for handicapped voting. In fact, we have the machines. If you're handicapped, if you're not able to go in, you are allowed to vote by driving in. You have to prove who you are. They bring the machine to you, you vote. So in essence, if the ruse to get you to support drive-through Jack-in-the-Box voting is that the handicapped need it, they're actually going to be hurting the handicapped. Because now everyone gets to crash that line, and if you were handicapped, and if you needed the assistance of the pull-up voting, you're not going to have to wait in line behind everybody else. You're actually going to hurt the people that you're using the name for to try to benefit. But that's a legislative issue, and Commissioners Court voted to condemn that. We also voted to condemn on 3-2. I was a 2. And they voted to condemn the heartbeat bill. And I proposed a substitute bill that it went down. So it's a privilege and honor to be with y'all. Thank you so much.
He has to leave, everybody, but before he leaves, we've been waiting to give him this for a while. He's one of our founding members. That's why you see his name on our membership over there, which is our, it's our gold level. And we thank you for being a part of that. Would you mind getting a picture